Sean, what's your sense of what the goals, potential deliverables are in Egypt? Will we learn more about financial contributions to rebuilding Gaza? Will we learn more about the military force and how that will be structured? What do you think will come out of Egypt?
It's interesting. And normally in a foreign visit like that, oh, if this was a normal thing, you would have all that kind of stuff. I think that what they're focused on right now, the visuals. They want to be seen as gathering all these folks that Netanyahu mentioned in his comments. I don't know that this is going to be a big, here's the financial commitments we got today. That may be next week, later this week. We'll see. But I don't know that that's what they really care about today. They want the visual of the president being seen as the president of peace, bringing everyone together, and then worry about dribbling out the financial security kind of contributions later down the road. I don't know, but that's what I would suggest might be happening today.
Dan, give me one or two, knowing we don't know the contours of where this is headed, give me one or two short-term implications of this for the U.S. domestic situation. For instance, New York City mayor's race or the shutdown. Does this have any impact on U.S.?
I don't think it'll impact New York much. Maybe the shutdown, just because anytime you have a historic moment like this and a feel-good moment, it strengthens your hand a little bit. But I think ultimately it doesn't have much of an impact on domestic politics at all.
I agree with that.
Okay, let's add Michael Granoff in. Michael, for those of you who don't know, is a staunch member of the two-way community. I grew up in the United States and moved for a short-term trip with his family to Israel, where they have stayed now, Michael, for
12 years.
a decade. Is that right?
12 years now.
Okay, and Michael has 12 years, dozen years, and Michael has children who serve in the military there and lives in the Tel Aviv area. Michael, focus on the hostages because the U.S. media is so focused on the president's participation, but how are the Israelis processing, because you monitor the press so assiduously, how are Israelis processing the return of the 20 hostages?
It is hard to describe the emotion of this day for many reasons, but the hostages are first and foremost among them. Mark, I think I sent you a picture the other day. I went to the ATM to get some cash, and the first thing you see is the yellow ribbon and bring them home logo on the ATM machine. They're in the airports. They're on every bus stop. Their pictures are everywhere. The yellow ribbons everyone wears, and this has been our national pain and our national obsession for 2 years. Just 5 doors down from me is the aunt and uncle of one of the hostages that was freed today. Their home has been adorned with his pictures for all of this time. And, there are two things that have happened that I honestly did not think were possible. And it really feels miraculous. And those two things are obviously the return of all the living hostages, and we hope we'll eventually get all of the non-living hostages as well, although the latest word is that we're not getting nearly as many as we were told we would today. But obviously the hostages are first and foremost, and they're really, I hardly met anyone, at least in the last 6-12 months, that thought it was possible that we'd get them all. The other thing we're getting that I never thought we'd get is something as close as possible to a date certain of the end of the war. We have had wars like the First Lebanon War and Second Intifada, which had no closure because they just sort of petered out. And in the case of Lebanon, we ended up staying in this security zone for 20 years and left. And that, in retrospect, was a mistake. So there was no finality. There was no conclusion. I never thought that we'd get that here, honestly, because I couldn't see how it was possible to do it, especially given the hostages. So those two things together are just miraculous. But like you said, we've come to know these hostages very well. I remember as a 10, 11-year-old kid in the U.S. When American hostages were held in Iran, and I kind of got obsessed with that and knew their names, and that's been the case here for the whole country. So it's incredible, but at the same time, it's very mixed. Right after this show, I will go get ready for our holiday of Simchat Torah, and I will go to synagogue, and we will dance with the Torah, because this is the time of year when we finish reading it and then begin again tomorrow with the story of Genesis, the beginning of the Torah. It's a joyous holiday. Simchat Torah means the joy of the Torah, and it was literally Simchas Torah 2 years ago that I was dancing that night in synagogue with a neighbor of mine, Aryeh Zirin, 26 years old. And the following morning, we went to synagogue about an hour after we had the first siren, and no one really knew what was going on. And, those of us who observe the holiday don't use devices. So we had very limited understanding that this was anything other than just, a random rocket from Gaza. But by the time something was over, everyone understood that we were in a very serious situation. And that same person, Aryeh Zirin, who lives around the corner from the, actually was called up. And he was actually, I was dancing with his family in synagogue on that morning, but he wasn't there. He was supposed to come later, but he didn't. And then it turned out that he had been called up and went down to Gaza. And then late that evening or that morning, it's hard to know, there was not a lot of sleeping in that time. We got word that he was killed. And that was the first funeral that I went to. It took several days. Jewish law is buried as quickly as possible, but there was so much chaos and so many people dead that it took until, I think, 3 days later until the funeral was held. And so tonight I will go to that same synagogue. I will dance with his family. And on Wednesday morning, we will go to his grave and observe the anniversary of his death. And there have been nearly 1,000 soldiers lost in combat in this, which I did the calculations, a little bit more than half on a proportionate basis what America lost in Vietnam. So it's a lot. And I'll also say one more thing that, reminds us of how even this victory, and I think it is a victory, as President Trump said, comes with a lot of clouds around it as well. Another very close friend of mine who lives in the neighborhood here, his 18-year-old nephew, who actually lived in Boston, but was visiting Israel in 2016, was on a bus and was shot by Palestinian terrorists and killed. And he called me yesterday to tell me that his family had been notified by the government of Israel that the murderer of his nephew is one of the 2,000 Palestinian prisoners who's going free in this deal. Yeah. And he's, a patriot. He said he's very happy that the deal was done. He's very happy for the families of the hostages. Very happy that the war is over. He had a son in the war also. His daughter actually lost her fiance in the war. But he has to live with the fact that the person that shot his nephew to death is free. So there are, there's a lot of pain, and like I said, a lot of emotions. But I think on the whole, the country is going to process all of this. And I think something that President Trump surprised me in saying, that many things surprised me in that speech. But one of the things that I was surprised he said, and that Jared also said in Hostage Square the other night, which I've been saying, but I didn't think they would, is that Israel is going to come out of this and be stronger, bigger, and more successful than ever. And the reason I'm sure, I don't know how they're sure of it, the reason I'm sure of it is because every Shabbat we have families around our table, and I see my kids' peers, and I see this generation, which has been called Israel's greatest generation. And they are really something else. And they everyone thought this was the generation of screens and TikTok and all of that. And, they were put into this position, and they not only stood up and served with valor and courage, but with ingenuity and with incredible passion. And I can see it that they now want to go and apply that to productive things and to solve problems, to cure cancer, and do all these other things. And so, President Trump, I think, was it he or someone said, if Israel was a stock, it would be the biggest buy in the world now. I really think that's true.
Yeah.
So anyway, maybe longer than I should have
Yeah.
gone on, but
No, Michael,
that's-
beautiful and really helpful. And we say conversations like no other. And I've been watching consuming media for 6 hours, and I've not heard a report that good. So thank you for that.
They say that something that's easy is like a walk in the park. Well, easier than a walk in the park, hit the subscribe button, be part of the two-way community, never miss an episode, be part of our conversations. Thank you for your service to America.
And don't forget, you can now listen to the morning meeting and Two Way Tonight on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.